With You to the End of the Road by Ghost in the Hella. Summary. Chloe's been staying with the Caulfields in the wake of the storm. It hasn't been going well. Notes. For Goodfellow, parentheses, Philly nice. Goodfellow prompted me on Tumblr with Pricefield and we should go somewhere. Just the two of us. How does that sound? Unbaited and unrevised, so please take it with a grain of salt. Dinner with the Caulfields hasn't gotten any less awkward in the 3 months since the storm. If anything, it's gotten worse. Chloe's been trying. She really, really has. She always walks around the corner from the house when she needs a cigarette, no matter how hard it's raining, and she's down to 3 smokes a day at this point anyway. She hasn't smoked pot at all, apart from a couple times when they were hanging out with Max's friends and they offered. She made very, very sure to cover the scent on both herself and Max before they got back, but somehow she suspects Max's parents still knew. She grew out the last remnants of blue in her hair because Vanessa wouldn't stop making snide comments about it. Of course, as soon as she cut off everything but the 3 or 4 inches of remaining blonde, Vanessa just started snarking about her hair being too short. She never complains about being compelled to sleep on the couch, even though Max said she'd be happy to share her room. Even though there's a fucking guest room right next to Max's room. But oh, what if Max's grandparents want to come for a visit? We can't have the sheets smelling like cigarettes. Never mind that nobody's come to visit at all since they've been here. Even though her nightmares since they left Arcadia Bay have been the worst, and it'd be really nice to have a living person nearby when she wakes up from them in the dead of night. She's even been looking for a job so she can start paying rent like the Caulfields keep unsubtly hinting they want her to. Funny thing, though, turns out high school dropouts with no work experience, a criminal record, severe PTSD symptoms, and highly visible tattoos aren't exactly in high demand in the workforce. Go figure. Earlier that day, she even had her first interview in over a month, an underpaid barista gig at a local coffee shop. She'd showered and brushed her teeth and made sure she was wearing clean, unstained, untorn clothes and everything. She'd even shaved her legs, which was probably stupid because it's January, and there was no way in hell the interviewer would see her legs, but she was just so desperate to make a good impression she wasn't thinking clearly. So of course, she fucked it all up. Honestly, it was fucked before she even went in. They probably only even called her in to meet a quota or some shit. The person interviewing her liked her tattoos, which seemed promising, but he liked her criminal record and total lack of experience a lot less. Classic Chloe Price. Fucking up every opportunity before she even enters the room. So when the Caulfields start laying into her over family dinner, she's even less in the mood for it than usual. It starts with a couple of none too subtle digs about the smell of cigarettes, and what an unpleasant smell that is for a non-smoker to endure when they're trying to eat, and Maxine, dear, can you even imagine marrying a smoker and how awful that would be? Why, they've all got one foot in the grave already. Chloe put on cologne and brushed her teeth again after the cigarette she stress-smoked after her interview, but Vanessa's got the nose of a bloodhound. This is followed by a series of apparently casual, but actually very rehearsed, comments to Max about colleges in the area, and what a great idea it would be for her to apply to one of them when she finishes her GED, so she can further her education and still live at home with her parents. Certainly she won't want to stray far from home again, not with, well, everything that happened at Blackwell. Not that the Caulfields ever actually talk about what happened at Blackwell. Nobody asks Chloe how her GED is going, surprisingly well, actually, or what her plans for college might be. Waste of time and money, probably. And Max just quietly pushes her peas around on her plate and tries to answer without answering. Once this line of questioning, pressuring, is exhausted, Ryan turns his attention to Chloe, the first time anybody but Max has addressed her directly since she returned this afternoon. So, Chloe, Maxine tells us you had a job interview today. Max almost chokes on her peas, flicking frantic blue eyes toward Chloe to silently scream that, oh fuck, she did not mean for this to be dinner conversation, please, please, please forgive. Chloe swallows the impulse to put a calming hand on Max's knee to reassure her. No way that would escape Vanessa's eagle eyes. Instead, she clears her throat and focuses on the crumbs in Ryan's beard. Yeah, coffee shop. That's great. Ryan's enthusiasm catches Chloe utterly off guard. It is? She glances at Max to non-verbally inquire whether Max's dad has perhaps been replaced by a pod person in the past 5 minutes. Max shrugs silently, looking as baffled as Chloe feels. It is, Ryan affirms. I have to say, it's good to see you showing some initiative. Of course, it's been a real trip down memory lane having you with us, but, well, one cannot live on nostalgia alone, however much Max may disagree with her Polaroid and her vinyl collection. Ryan chuckles, shaking his head as he gazes fondly at his increasingly confused daughter. And, of course, one cannot live on charity alone. His gaze settles on Chloe once more, every trace of fondness now abruptly vanished. Dad? Now, Maxine, I know it'll be an adjustment, but are you kicking me out? Somehow, Chloe manages to squeeze the words out even though her lungs feel like they've been punched out of her chest. Ryan and Vanessa exchange a look, and holy shit, they totally fucking are. Dad? Mom? Max's voice is trembling. She sounds like she's about to cry. It's hard to confirm since all Chloe can see is red. Are you? Kicking out is a bit harsh, Ryan objects without denying it. But it's been 3 months, Maxine, and we all agreed that this arrangement would only be temporary. It simply seems. Max stands abruptly, her silverware rattling on the table. She didn't even get the job, Dad. It's just an interview. She might not even... Maxine, really? Vanessa exclaims, mortified. Now, Maxine, we're not going to just throw her out on the street, but... Chloe can't listen to another word of this. She's fucked. She's completely and utterly fucked. She's already lost her parents, her hometown, everything she owned, Rachel, everyone and everything but what she's managed to scrape together here in Seattle. And now she's going to lose that, too. She's not going to get the job. She won't have anywhere to live. Max's parents won't let her visit. She'll probably never see Max again. And honestly, Max will be better off for it. Chloe's not sure how she got to Max's room or how long she's been there, but the next thing she knows, she's being spooned by a puffy-eyed Max on the too-small bed Max slept in the 5 years they were apart. Max is saying something to her, and it takes a few minutes before Chloe can make out anything more detailed than the sweet softness of her voice, the slight, familiar rasp to it like she's always just woken up. I'm sorry, she's whispering over and over. I'm sorry. It's okay, Chloe murmurs when she can persuade her vocal cords to engage. It's not your fault your parents are dicks. Max freezes for a moment, then squeezes Chloe tightly. I'll talk to them, she promises. Nah. Chloe shakes her head. Her eyes hurt. No reason you should tank your relationship with your folks just because I'm a fuck-up. I'll figure something out. You're not a fuck-up, Max objects, pulling away so she can look Chloe in the eye. You're not, she insists when Chloe gives her a skeptical look. My parents are just... She lets out a burdened sigh. Dicks? Chloe suggests. Yeah. She strokes Chloe's hair in silence, and Chloe lets her. She relaxes into the quiet of the moment. It's going to be okay. Somehow it's going to be okay. She has no idea how, but Max will make it happen. Eventually Max's hand stills, and Chloe can feel her chest tense as words attempt to form in her mouth. She waits patiently for whatever Max is trying to figure out how to say. We should go somewhere. Just the two of us. How does that sound? Chloe lifts her head from Max's shoulder to look her in the eye. Max looks slightly nervous, but mostly she looks determined. You're serious? Max nods. Completely. Anywhere you want. She scratches the back of her neck and gives Chloe a sheepish smile. Well, anywhere you want that we can realistically get to, anyway. Good point. We probably can't drive to Paris. Max laughs. So you want to? No nagging, no job interviews, no separate beds, Chloe cuts in. Max makes a face at her, then giggles. No separate beds, she agrees. Just Max and Chloe and the open road. No shit I want to. But your parents... They'll get over it, Max shrugs. Or they won't. But if it's a choice between staying here without you, or leaving with you, then I'm with you to the end of the road. There are a million things that Chloe should say. Admonishments, expressions of gratitude, admissions of fear, declarations of love. Chloe swallows them all when Max leans in for her kiss. Notes. Thank you to Goodfellow for the prompt, and to all of you for reading. Comments and kudos are always greatly appreciated. First, I should probably just mention that the person who prompted me has gone through a few different handles on AO3 and on Tumblr, so I went with, for this, what is the most recent thing that AO3 is saying, rather than what I had written in the notes, just to try to keep it consistent with what the person who prompted me is currently using at the time of recording. So there is a slight discrepancy between what it says in the actual notes for this fic on AO3 and what I said in the recording for the name of the prompter. Second thing I should probably talk about with this fic is how I am portraying Max's parents. Clearly, I have very strong feelings about the Caulfields and how they would treat Chloe. We don't really see, in canon, Max's parents. We get a brief glimpse of them in Before the Storm, and we get some, photographs of them, and we get their text messages, and that's really it. That's all we've got to base their characterizations on. And portrayals of the Caulfields vary in the fandom. Most depictions that I have read are a good bit rosier than what I depict. People seem to love it, especially Ryan, which, I can get just from looking at the pictures of him. He looks like a nice guy. He's got, he's a bit of a bear. He's got that cuddly daddy bear thing going on with the beard and everything. He looks like a nice guy. But from, reading the text messages of Max's parents, for me, has really colored the way that I write them, because, at least from the way that I read their text messages, they kind of sound like dicks. Especially, the thing that kind of stands out to me, and why I tend to write Ryan in particular as being a bit of an asshole, a bit uncaring, is that in his text messages, there's this one exchange in particular where Max has been threatened. Ryan has received an anonymous text message that is quite threatening to Max, if I recall. I'm not looking at the text messages right now as I record this, so I'm just kind of going from what I remember. But yeah, he received an anonymous text message that was basically threatening that Max better keep her nose out of other people's business or something like that. And he texts Max, and his text messages are much more concerned about the fact that a stranger has his phone number than they are about Max's safety. He genuinely does not seem to give a shit that somebody has threatened his daughter, which is pretty messed up. That does not sound his text messages to me, particularly in that exchange, do not read to me as a good and caring father. They read to me as somebody who cares more about himself and who does not necessarily trust his daughter to make the right decisions, because he basically, in my memory, he basically implies that he thinks Max gave out his phone number and he doesn't like strangers having his number. Why on earth would Max have given his phone number to somebody who's going to use it to anonymously threaten her? It doesn't make sense why he would even think that she had given this stranger his phone number. So yeah, his texts with her, particularly in that instance, to me, implies somebody who does not care as much about the happiness and welfare of his daughter as he does about his own comfort and his own rules being adhered to. So that's why I tend to write Ryan the way that I write him. That's why I tend to write Ryan as being a bit of a jerk. Vanessa, I don't have a particular text exchange that stands out to me, except that in general, she and Ryan, and I feel especially Vanessa, try to convince Max to come back home. She wants Max there. They both kind of, to me, come across as a bit controlling. Not necessarily in the same ways, but both a bit controlling. And also that they tend to refer to her, sometimes they'll call her Max in the text, but mostly they'll call her Maxine, even though she's pretty adamant in canon that, it is Max, never Maxine. So that, to me, also kind of sounds like parental bullshit of, parents who don't actually listen to what their child wants and who their child is. So I've sort of formed this picture in my head of who the Caulfields are, and it's not the rosiest picture. Some of it is based on, as I said, some of it is based on the little bits and pieces that we see in canon, and especially if we do take into account that little snippet we see of them in Before the Storm at, like, William's funeral. Like, fuck, that is stone cold. Like, goddamn. Just leaving straight from William's funeral, like, it doesn't even look like they say goodbye to Joyce and Chloe, or offer any condolences. Like, presumably they have already offered at least, token lip service condolences at the start of the ceremony. So I'll give them credit for that, at least. I'll assume that much good of them. But, like, you're standing right next to them. Like, say goodbye? Say something to them? Give them a hug? So my portrayals of the Caulfields tend to be quite negative. I don't generally go, like, super over-the-top negative. This is definitely one of the most clear-cut of, like, the Caulfields are dicks stories that I've written. Usually it's a little more subtle than that. And it's usually more from Chloe's perspective. Just because, like, with the picture that I have painted in my head, based on the snippets in the games, with, like, the text messages, the brief cameo in Before the Storm, the implication that they spend most of their time at Chloe's and not at Max's, my headcanon for them is that Vanessa, at the very least, is quite fastidious and maybe not so into this, reckless, wild child, this reckless, wild child of Chloe Price. I feel like she's probably a bit more than Vanessa can stomach, even as children. So yeah, I've got a pretty big headcanon built up around the Caulfields, which gets alluded to in a lot of my fics, and which I'm sure I'll dig more into in other notes. I don't want to go on for longer than this very short fic about, here's my whole headcanon about the Caulfields and why they suck. But yeah, this was when I was prompted to, write a fic in which Max is suggesting that, like, we should go somewhere, just the two of us. Just what came to mind for me was, like, Chloe and Max wanting to get the hell away from the Caulfields. Because a lot of people do tend to assume that, like, okay, yeah, that's a logical place for them to go after the storm. And I agree, that it makes perfect sense. Like, Max's parents have canonically tried to get her to come home whenever things go bad, so it would be the logical place for them to go. And a lot of people seem to assume that they would both be welcome there. But I have a suspicion that although Max would be very welcome to come home, that Chloe would be less well received. And especially since, like, presumably if the Caulfields had been invested in the friendship of Max and Chloe, they would have done a bit more work to, like, keep that friendship going in those years where we know that Max really didn't stay in touch and really didn't maintain that friendship. I feel like if they had been invested in that friendship and invested in, their daughter having her best friend, like, they would have, kind of nudged that into staying a little more connected. Seattle is not that far. Like, it's a few hours. They totally could have brought her to visit. So yeah, my thinking is that the Caulfields were perfectly content to let that friendship fall apart, and that they were probably quite happy that Max and Chloe were no longer the best of friends, and that they would probably not be super thrilled to see Chloe turning back up in their daughter's life, especially, if she was too much for them to handle as a kid. They seem like the kind of people, to me anyway, who would be quite put off by grown-up Chloe. You know, because I love Chloe to bits, but she's pretty rough around the edges, you know? I mean, she's got some stuff going on that parents, especially like controlling parents who have a particular mindset of who their child is and who they want that child to be and how they want that child to behave, that parents like that would not be thrilled about. So yeah, this story was a nice little dive into kind of what I think of Max's shitty parents, and how they perceive Chloe and how they would treat Chloe, which in other fics I had basically just alluded to and not really written about explicitly. So I think this is the most sort of in-depth view I've shown of the Caulfields being shitty in their own particular ways, and to show like how that impacts not only Chloe but Max, and how she perceives that and what she's willing to do for Chloe. Like, if she was willing to sacrifice a whole damn town for her, then she might just be willing to stand up to her parents, stand up for Chloe, and stand up for herself. So, not the most flattering portrayal of the Caulfields. Obviously, there are many who disagree with this kind of portrayal, and, you know, there is room for all kinds of different portrayals of the Caulfields. We have very little information about who they are as people. This is just my interpretation of them. I like a story with supportive parents. My parents are very supportive. Nothing at all like the Caulfields, fortunately. But I do know a lot of people, and especially a lot of LGBT people, who have parents like this that are controlling and don't really approve of their relationships and the people in their lives, and who don't have the parents they deserve. So I think it's important to have multiple perspectives on the kinds of parents that Max and Chloe and the other characters in this universe have, and how those parents treat them. So yeah, I guess in conclusion, like, if you want to write awesome, lovable bear Ryan and all of that fun stuff, and, you know, Max the elder Vanessa, you know, Vanessa as basically grown-up Max, like, awesome, more power to you. This is just my take on them. This is just what feels true to me for who Max's parents would be. I hope that whether you agreed with how I portrayed them or not, that you enjoyed this story and enjoyed this little behind-the-scenes chat. And thank you very much for listening.